Sachin, welcome to Jam with Sam.
Thank you very
Finally
much.
here.
Thank you very much for calling me. I apologize. I was supposed to be here a month ago or a month.
2 months back.
2 months back. Unfortunately, there was a medical emergency at home and I couldn't make it. But this time when he called me, I said I have to go, despite the 2-hour traffic. Ride from my office till here. In fact, I'm going away again tomorrow.
Yeah, you told me.
For a wedding. So
how's your dad now?
He's doing much better than he was when you called me the last time. He's home, doesn't go out much. We have a 24-hour caretaker. It's much better than last time, but he's 82, so you can't expect much from him.
Fantastic. So Sachin, editor of Midday. Wow. Tell us something about your journey, how you got there.
Okay. I was studying economics at the university. This was 94. And there was an ad in the paper saying, Midday wants trainee writers.
Okay.
And I fancied myself as a writer at that time. Mostly because I had won a couple of essay competitions in college. Okay. And there was one very interesting organization called Forum for Free Enterprise. I don't know whether it's still working right now, but it had Nani Palkhiwala as one of the chairmen. It was during our college days. So the guys who are in the 90s may remember the Forum for Free Enterprise. So I had entered a competition there and I came number 2 in the country or something of that sort. So I thought I can be a writer. So we all harbor such fantasies when we are young. So I gave it a shot, and then when I reached the Midday office, I realized that there are 200 other people who had the same fantasy. Yeah? Anyway, what happened was that I got selected, and that's how I started. I started as a trainee writer at Midday in '94 while I was studying at the university. Okay. So I used to reach home at 2 in the night, wake up at 6 again because the classes would begin at 8. So it was tough. So I left Midday around 10 years later.
For 10 years?
I worked there for 10 years. It's unbelievable, almost anachronistic right now to work in an organization for 10 years. But that's how it was in the 90s, I guess. So I joined Digit, which is a technology magazine.
Just by Media.
Just by Media. Which is now 9.9. It got taken over by a company recently, about 3-4 years ago. So I joined there as the executive editor. And in 2005, there was a slew of newspapers which were going to be launched. So Hindustan Times and DNA were announced. And to block those newspapers, Times of India started Mumbai Mirror. So about 2 months before HT and DNA launched, Mumbai Mirror was launched. So much so that all the people from Midday were taken by the Times staff at double the salaries and triple the salaries, and just to block talent to go to HT and DNA. And the Times is a past master at this. I mean, they are the number 1 company for nothing. So so what happened was that at that time there was almost all journalists were getting calls from various organizations, from HT and DNA. So I got a call from Pradeep Goa at that time, who said that we are looking for a news editor. So would you like to join? And they were also looking for a Washington correspondent. So I said, yeah, why not? Let's give it a shot. And it was a launch vehicle. And you remember the hoardings that were there all over the city. The person, I just realized that the person who did the hoardings is in the audience today. So there was this entire aura of this whole new newspaper age that was going to happen in 2005. And we were supposed to launch on July 30th, 2005. And July 26th, the floods happened. Right? So the printing press was flooded. Our offices were flooded. We could not go home. We were in office for 48 hours because we just could not go home. But we launched the paper. I mean, July 30th was the committed deadline because there were hoardings all over the place saying that July 30th is the first date. And there was a huge, long 1 hour meeting which said, should we launch, should we not launch? Anyway, we launched. And then they sent me to Washington, which was a great experience. I was the Washington correspondent during the very exciting nuclear deal. The US-India nuclear deal was happening, and that was really the most exciting time for Indian journalists in the US. There were only about 4 or 5 at that time. And I came back to India. I was really homesick. I mean, I loved the job, but there was no family. See, the whole thing about going to the US is that if you're going there during your college days, you have an entire great friend circle there. But when you're there in your early 30s, which I was, it's quite boring. I felt homesick. My wife felt homesick. My wife was with the World Bank at that time.
Okay.
And both of us came back. Then we went to Delhi, Hindustan Times, for about 8 to 9 months. I could not stand the work culture at Hindustan Times, Delhi especially. Bombay is a great place to work, but Delhi not so much. Then I joined another startup which was called Mail Today, which was from the India Today group. So I had this habit of starting with working with startups, and each time I've gone somewhere, we've relaunched either the magazine. For example, Digit was relaunched after I went. Midday.com was launched after I went. So it's again, when I joined Midday, we relaunched the newspaper with a completely new logo and new design, new editorial policies, etc., etc. So that's how it is. So
Okay.
It's been 20 and a half years now. Yes, I am as old as I look.
So then from Midday, what made you go back to Midday?
Midday has always got this exciting work culture. We are a team of really young people. I think the average age must be around 27 or 28.
Okay.
Yeah. So at 40, I'm really one of the oldest people out there. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the more exciting thing was that when I got called, it was 2011. Midday had plunged to a very bad phase. It was the circulation was down to just about 80,000
Okay.
from a high of 190, 2 lakh copies per day. So it was really a challenge. One. Secondly, it was just taken over by the Dainik Jagran Group, which is one of the world's largest media companies. Dainik Jagran is the world's largest read newspaper
Okay.
across languages. So when they asked me to join, it was quite exciting. It was a challenge. I was worried that I was leaving an India Today to go to a newspaper which was not considered really a good competition for the rest of the market. So it was a big challenge. Actually, that got me in more than anything else.
Okay.
The money was not great. Journalists, despite whatever you hear outside, are still not paid as highly as advertising people. So, so it was tough. But I think that the bigger thing was that how do you make a product go from an X level to an X plus 5 level, right? So we tried really hard. We worked 16 hours a day. So it paid off. Right now, our circulation is back to around 200,000.
Wow.
Our readership, although the IRS, our company has rejected the IRS for the Indian Readership Survey for various reasons. Lots of companies have. But according to the Indian Readership Survey, we are now India's 7th largest read newspaper. So that's the kind of recognition that you get after a lot of hard work, sleepless nights, collecting a team of people which wants to do better than you. As David Ogilvy in his book, Ogilvy on Advertising, very wisely said, always choose a person for your team who's wiser and more intelligent than you. Because the moment you choose a person who's less intelligent than you, then the whole company goes down.
Yeah.
Right? A person who wants to take over your job is the person you should hire always. And we've always followed that principle. So far, our attrition rate has come down from 24% to around 3%.
Oh.
So that has really worked because the guys and again, like I said, it's not about the money, because honestly, Midday doesn't pay the best salaries in the market, but it's always about the challenge that you need to bring out a paper in such tough conditions. Right? You have giants in the market, and then how you tackle those giants and still survive and thrive. I think that is more important. So like you said, wealth management is important. So revenue management for a newspaper is
important. Which has been one of the most intense story you've done so far?
For me, for myself, yeah. When I was in Washington, I broke a story about the Taliban.
Oh.
What happened was, during the unfortunate Kandahar hijack, the plane was taken to an unknown place in Kandahar, airport, where even to reach Kandahar, people needed visas inside Afghanistan, right?
Okay.
So it was not the Afghan visa, but the Taliban was issuing their own visa. Yeah. And I was speaking to the biographer of Osama bin Laden called Peter Bergen, who was a journalist with CNN a long time back. Now he's an independent consultant on counterterrorism. And just offhand, he told me that while the negotiations between the Indian government and the Taliban were going on, it was actually Osama bin Laden who was prompting the Taliban to negotiate with the Indian government. And the Indian government had no idea, because they couldn't understand the language. They couldn't understand, obviously the voice was not available to them. They were all talking on the phone. And it was a very precarious situation. So we broke that story, and it became a national issue at that point of time, because the question was raised in Parliament, because our Home Minister had accompanied the terrorists to Kandahar. And that story was important primarily because it exposed the connections between Maulana Masood Azhar, those guys who were captured in Kashmir, the 5 people who were captured at that time and were released because of this as ransom. It exposed the connections between the various factions of terrorism that happens in the AFPAK area. And later on, the guys who were released were responsible for a lot of terror attacks inside Pakistan. Like, for example, one person was responsible for the beheading of Daniel Pearl, the journalist. One person was responsible for the attack on Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, I think. One person was responsible for the Parliament attack. Maulana Masood Azhar was responsible for the Parliament December 13 Parliament attack. So a lot of events kind of bifurcated and began to grow Hydra-like faces because of that one event. And this kind of exposed the inability of the Indian government to understand the complexities of the Afghan area. And none of the intelligence agencies, none of the government bureaucrats could know that it was Osama on the other side. And that was probably the most hard-hitting story that I did. Although I did file about 400 stories in those 2 years, but I think that story was the most intense.
The truth has to be out, come hell or high water. Do you debate or not whether you have to cover a story or not?
We do. I mean, it's a dilemma that all journalists face on a daily basis. Should we cover this story or not? Right. So the primary message that we tell our journalists or reporters is, who is our biggest constituency? Our biggest constituency is not the BJP, it's not the Congress, it is not the Aam Aadmi Party, it is not the Shiv Sena, it is none of the other regional parties. The biggest constituency that we should have is Mumbai city. We are a local paper, we are a city paper. So there is no point in understanding the complexities of what is happening inside the Shiv Sena if you are not focused on how will it impact your reader. So the first question that any reader or any reporter will ask and any person in the edit meeting will ask, we have 2 edit meetings, one in the morning, one in the evening. Every time we ask this singular question, how does it impact the daily lives of our readers? In whatever way possible. Do they bring joy? Do they provoke outrage? Do they help people to better their lives? Does it help make a better road in the city? Will corruption be reduced because of this story? Will criminals be exposed because of this? And we've done a lot of these stories, and as you know, we even lost a journalist called J-Day, who was shot because he was continually exposing all these people. One of our journalists was arrested under the Official Secrets Act and was kept in jail for 4 days for exposing a railway armament factory, a railway armament storage house, which was so bad that it started leaking from the top, and all the crores worth of equipment that was bought after 26/11 was going to waste. So we have a lot of these challenges every day. Last year we exposed a baby selling racket 2 years ago.
You covered it again.
And we covered it because the person who was part of the baby selling racket, the police let her go scot-free, and the same woman has now been indicted again in the same baby selling racket. So there are these challenges every day. We are not a law and order authority, so we can't change corruption in that sense, but we can expose, we can do that. So the first question we ask is, how will it impact lives? And that's how we debate whether a story should be done or not.
So what is tabloid journalism and normal journalism, and how do you feel about that?
I don't think there is anything different between tabloid journalism and normal journalism. Tabloid journalism is far more aggressive. In India, in fact, I think these days the broadsheets are more tabloid than tabloids themselves. Television channels are more tabloid than tabloids themselves, and this is a reality. And for whatever reason, we may laugh about it, we may crack jokes about it. The fact is that this is reality. For whatever reason, it might be revenue pressures, it might be viewership pressures, whatever, right? But the lines that were dividing tabloid journalism versus broadsheet journalism maybe in the 50s and 60s and 70s and probably even in the 80s is now completely vanished. It's not even blurred, it's just vanished, because everybody's chasing the same big story, right? Everybody wants that one big story on the front page that will make people sit up and continue reading newspapers, because I don't want my newspaper readers to go to a digital format, at least not now, right? Maybe 5 years down the line, we'll completely go digital, and 10 years down the line, we may not have newspapers left anymore. But the kind of journalism that we want to do is more aggressive. It's politically provocative. It challenges the norms of society. We challenge bigotry. We challenge corruption. So there are a lot of things that we want to do. So there is, to come back to your question, I don't think there is anything left as a difference between normal journalism versus tabloid. We are possibly more investigative in nature in that sense. Absolutely. Yeah, we expose a lot of more stories, a lot more corrupt people, etc. in our paper now than most broadsheets would do.
So by exposing all this corruption and all, like I used to use a couple of years back, these guys will come, especially from the Saffron party, they'll come, they'll break all the computers, they'll smash everything and go off. This thing is reduced quite an extent now. It
has reduced, but I think Midday has this sole privilege of being attacked by both the Shiv Sena and the Congress. So I think it was in the year 2010 or 2009, I don't remember. I was not in Midday at that time. But there was a headline on the front page which said, Mr. CM, are you foolish? And it was about some stupid policy that the government had introduced. And there's a lot of these Congress people came, and I think it was Akar Patel who was the editor at that time. And they broke windows, they broke computers, and the journalists could do nothing because there were gundas who came, right? We've been attacked by other parties also. A couple of years ago, we did a story about a guy from the Shiv Sena who was in cahoots with the local builders, and he was distributing that money that he used to get to various other political parties. So when we exposed that guy as a rapist, because he he had sexually assaulted a woman continuously, and that woman happened to be a constable's wife. And the guy was so powerful that the police station where the constable was working was unwilling to take the FIR. So can you imagine the plight of the common people? In we always give galis to constables and all that, but here the constable would see his wife getting raped, goes to a police station, and the senior inspector he reports to does not take the FIR. So finally, we exposed that guy, and the BJP, the Congress, the NCP, and the Sena all descended on our office. So again, we are possibly the only newspaper where all four major political parties have come and tried to attack us. So, but these are challenges that we face every day. But that should not be. So there's a risk that we take sometimes. Sometimes we put the life, especially after J-Day's murder, we sometimes put the life of our journalist much ahead of the story, because I feel that the journalist's life is more important than the story at that point of time.
A lot of misreporting happens nowadays. Like, for example, the Times of India, and the 25th December is a working day and children have to come over there.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of thing on Twitter and that thing happening over there. But I saw that the paper has stood by their journalist over there and their story over there.
Yeah.
So sometimes the user is like, we said, what shit is this? There's outage on Twitter and all that stuff. Then you see a tweet from Smriti coming and telling, this is what I did. So where is the truth over there? Is it, how do you come to know? Because most people trust a newspaper. Right. But today Twitter has become more powerful than a newspaper over there.
First of all, it was not misreporting. Times of India did not print one sentence wrong in that particular story.
Okay.
There was actually an order which was sent out by the Ministry of HRD to various universities, to all vice chancellors of all universities across the country who are affiliated to the HRD ministry, which is the UGC.
UGC.
And it was very clear that on 25th of December you will have essay competitions and art competitions and whatnot on 25th of December, and they should be video recorded.
Okay.
And then sent as a report the same evening. And this is an official circular. It's out there. It's on the official Ministry of HRD site. So when to be very mild, Smriti Irani, when she gave out that tweet, was being extremely economical with the truth. So and that's the mildest way of putting it, right? So in newspapers, what happens is there's always a Rashomon-like situation. Right? There are 4 different people and 4 different versions of the same event. Right? So when I came here, for instance, I'll have a version of the event of the traffic, right? But somebody else will say, but I came from the other road and there was no traffic at all, so are you lying, right? So there are these, there will always be this Rashomon kind of situation. Rashomon was this great Japanese movie made by Akira Kurosawa. And that's the problem that all of us face, because my truth is different from your truth. But there's a difference in terms of reality, right? So truth may be different, but the reality is one. Right? So to question that reality and to bring out the truth in the most honest way possible, I think is the biggest challenge for newspapers and media houses these days, because you're challenged and scrutinized constantly by people on Facebook, on Twitter, and these are extremely vocal people. People who are family members will go against you. So one rule I have in family discussions is that we'll never discuss politics, because it's always polarizing. It always polarizes. You meet friends over coffee and you will see that people get angry and they come to blows discussing Mr. Modi and Mr. Gandhi, right? So there are always these issues. So the real issue is that to talk in a more philosophical sense, there might be no absolute truth. There's no absolute reality. There is something that has happened, and how far close you are to the truth is the most important, and that will give credibility to the media house that you work for.
Good answer. So do you think that social media is useful for your personal brand, and which is your favorite platform? I'm only going to choose between Facebook and Twitter. I divide my time equally. I've reduced, to be very honest, I've reduced my time on Twitter these days, primarily because the same reason I stopped watching TV news 3.5 years ago. Yeah, I don't watch TV news at all. It doesn't add any value to my life. What has happened on Twitter is the same thing that you spoke about. It's
there are different versions of truth, and everybody says that I'm right. And this whole culture of I'm right and you're wrong is destroying the very essence of the medium that Twitter was meant to be. Now, in the early days, I mean, you would remember more than I would. In the early days of Twitter, there was always healthy debate.
Yes,
People used to engage each other in dialogue. There would be constant exchanges between two sets of people. There was no division between the left wing and the right wing. There was no word called secular. There was no word called paid media. So all of this was there in the early days. Now, I think what Twitter has reached now is a time in human parlance. I think we've reached a teenage year, where everybody is rebellious. Everybody says that I want more attention from my parents than anybody else, right? So everybody is shouting, everybody is pointing fingers at each other, and the same thing may happen with Facebook. You have, because familiarity is growing so much with people you haven't even met. I have 1,100 friends on Facebook, but I meet maybe 10 of them. The rest of them are I won't even interact with them. So what I've done is on the last few months I've started trimming my Facebook friends list. It doesn't make sense because it's just a constant waste of time, right? So people I engage with are the people I remain friends with. I meet them offline. I make it a point to meet them offline. I had not known you, for instance. I know you only from Twitter. I know Sandeep only from Twitter and Facebook. So now that's the kind of engagement that you would need even in journalism.
Yes.
Because what is happening on Twitter is, again, my version of the truth versus your version of the truth. Right? So although Twitter remains my favorite social medium, social platform, that's only because it's quick. I can give a quick analysis of what I think is happening. Facebook, again, the restriction is that it goes only to a few friends. Twitter is universal in that sense, although Facebook also can be universal, given that sometimes things go viral. Right? So the difference between the two is that Facebook I use more for personal engagement, where I talk to my family, my friends. I put up my my photographs. I do a little bit of weekend photography, so I put up those photographs. And on Twitter, it's the complete opposite. So sometimes I crack jokes on politics. Sometimes I take on people. But honestly, given the time that I want to spend with my family, with my work, with my daughter especially, because she's 6.5, so I want to be with her when she's growing up. So I've reduced my time on Twitter. It's only once in 12 hours or so that I post something, I check something. Or if there's a major event happening, then obviously I'll go through it. For example, the Peshawar thing. Because I have a habit of, I have this thing of not watching TV news. So that my entire knowledge about the Peshawar attack came from Twitter. And there were, of course, pictures, and in between I used to go to the television, find out really to what, because live visuals I think is not journalism, it's technology. Right? So that I can bear with. It's a journalism I can't bear with.
So you love photography. Is it a passion for you?
Yes, it is. It's not obsession yet.
Okay.
But it is passion. Over the last 2-3 years, I developed a greater interest in macro photography.
I've seen those photographs.
Yeah. So
you won an award also, something
recently, 2-3 weeks ago. So I photograph butterflies. I photograph insects. I photograph bugs, which many people just crumple and go ahead. So that's what I do, but that's mostly over the weekends. And so I recently did a butterfly course at the Bombay Natural History Society to understand how butterflies are identified. And I amazingly realized that India has about 1,600 species of butterflies. Bombay alone has 150. And I go to Ovlekar Wadi, which is in Thane, which has a garden of which has a butterfly garden, and there alone there are some 135 species of butterflies. So the last time I went, I could capture 20 to 22 species. But you have to be really patient about because you have to spend hours and hours just getting that right shot, because butterflies don't stop they don't wait for you. So they just keep flitting around.
Something about your family?
I stay in Bombay with my wife and my daughter. My parents stay about 100 meters away from my house. They are very clear that they want their independence. They don't want their son to dictate, what they should do. Especially channel surfing. Right? So my daughter is 6.5. She's in grade 1. My wife is an e-learning professional.
Okay.
She's working with Tata Interactive Systems. Right
TSS.
now.
Okay.
TIS, yeah. And we've been married for 14 years, 11 months, and 20 days.
Oh, that's a good memory.
So next 28th of December is my 15th wedding anniversary.
Okay.
So like I said, I'm not as young as I look. I'm quite old.
Okay, quick gun, Sam. One word answer. Mumbai.
Home.
Times of India.
Great newspaper.
Okay, that's being politically correct. One word.
No, I seriously think it's a good newspaper. I mean, I know it gets a lot of flack for what it's doing, but I think it gets a lot of flack also because it's the biggest. It's the largest, so it's very natural that it should get the flags. Right?
Politics.
No words.
Bollywood.
Charming. What do you say? Charming, I guess. Charming, yeah.
Right. I was just reading your investigative journalism has got a lot into infrastructure. Like I recently had an accident on the expressway, and this guy Ranjit Jadhav, he reports that. So he called me. So the first thing I did is after accident, I took photographs and tweeted that photograph and put it uploaded over there. So my wife like, see, you had an accident and you're taking out photographs. You at least are you alive? She's calling me over there like. So it happened over there, and we had this rapid action force coming. The guys came and immediately it took us and all. So they called me up and they said, we want to do a story. Okay, do the story. And next thing that this thing is businessman escapes death on. And right from my barber to my tailor and all, they're saying, "Saab, aap theek hai." They are observing any leg is broken, head is broken, and unfortunately or fortunately, one of my friends, a Rotarian, he shared that photograph the next day. And he got some 600, 700 likes and comments where he's like, Sam, I'm fed up here. How much to keep replying to these people? Continuously comments to keep going, and nobody goes back to the top comment section to see what has actually happened over there. So, these things, they really break a lot of infrastructure. I've been seeing he's doing a good job. So, I think yours a newspaper is focusing on this infrastructure a lot over there.
True, primarily because, we have identified I think 3-4 areas of things that affect the Mumbaikar. So roads, obviously, number one. Everybody travels by road. Everybody's worried about roads. The city's crumbling infrastructure. I think it's a hyperbole. It's exaggerated a bit. It's not crumbling. It's not crumbled yet. For example, we've got the metro. Okay? Yes, after a lot of trouble and pain and heartbreak and whatnot, we've got the metro, we've got the monorail, we've got the Eastern Freeway, we've got the Bandra Worli ceiling. So there are these, islands of improvement that are happening in the city. What is not happening is the overall plan or the strategy that you need, like a CEO would do for a company. Right? There are these HODs who would take care of each part of the business, but there's a CEO who would say, how does my city look? How does my city look 15 years down the line? Okay. How does my city look to my children, to my grandchildren? Can I build a city for them? And unfortunately, what is happening is that neither the politicians, and I'm sorry to say, neither the civil society is using their influence to do anything. Right? So again, there are these islands of influence. For example, let's say Sandeep did this chat with the Joint Commissioner of Traffic. Right? Now, there are other organizations which will organize, meetings between, politicians and bureaucrats and the civil society. But I can challenge you in any forum if I ask anybody, who's your local municipal councillor, corporator? How many people can confidently answer who's their local municipal corporate? And that person really is the most important person in your life. How many people can answer who's your local MLA? that person is the guy or the woman who's changing laws in the state assembly which will impact your day-to-day lives. We may know the MP because he is MPs are they come once in 5 years to your house, but it's actually your local corporator and your local MLA who are the most important people in your lives as far as politics is concerned. And whether it's journalists, whether it's civil society, whether it is rich businessmen, doesn't matter. They don't know who their corporator is, and that's the real sad part of living in the city. So it's not just we always blame the politicians. I think the greater blame lies with civil society for not asking questions of those politicians. For the 2 years that I spent in the US, I always found that civil society, whether on weekends or whoever, they will go door to door campaigning for their wish list. Doesn't matter who is standing for elections. Suppose you're a Democrat, you're a signed up Democrat. There's a different, their democracy is slightly different than ours. So they will go door to door campaigning for what they want, right? And they'll say, vote for this particular person because he will do this. And there are some disruptive things also. For example, people in large metros in the US vote for the fact that there should be no Walmart in the city.
Okay.
And it's true. I mean, none of the Walmarts in the US you'll find in the middle of the city. They're always on the outskirts, 30 miles away from your city. And there's a reason for that, because the employment, the kind of small shops that are cannibalized by Walmart, etc. All these are major issues there. So not different from what we face out here, the kirana shops versus the malls, right? But what I find the difference is that yes, there's a greater engagement. I think that greater engagement is lacking in our cities. I think people here, the enlightened people here, the 30 or 40 people that you've got here, go back home, and I'm not sermonizing out here, just go back home and ask, how can I engage myself with the local politicians so that my road is cleaner? I walk by that road every day and say, kachra hai yaar, but I don't have the time or the inclination to call up the corporate and say, come and remove my kachra. So that's a small thing you can do.
Okay. And a word to the entrepreneurs out here.
I'm not an entrepreneur, so I'll be the last person to give any kind of advice. But I think hard work and commitment is what pays off in the end. Like Farzana very wisely said that we can all expect good things in life, but if you don't work towards the good things in life, then the good things will never come to you. So that's the only thing. I mean, you are far more accomplished than I am, so the wrong person to ask for advice. But that's it.
Thank you so much, Sachin. It's been great having you here. It's been waiting for you.
Thank you so much.
Couple of clicks will go now.
Yeah.
And this is from Sanjeev.
Thank you so much. Thank you
so much.